And the first order of business is roll call. Kyle?
Ms. Bain? Ms. Chaput?
Present.
Mr. Dugan?
Present.
Mr. Driven?
Present.
Mr. Eppers? Ms. Finney? Mr. Heil?
Here.
Ms. Johnson?
Here.
Ms. Kirkton?
Here.
Mr. Klimt is here. And Mr. Yochley. All right.
Okay, we have a quorum. Next order of business is approval of the minutes. They've been distributed. Are there any additions or corrections? Seeing none, I have a motion to adopt the minutes.
I'll move. I'll second.
Matthew and Joe, thank you. Next is public comment, and I see is Councilmember Smith is with us. No public comment, no governance, member discussion and questions. Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. And the first order of business is discussion on Charter Article 4 and the proposed language. And Neil, I was worried that the new language that we're proposing for 4 has a conflict with Article 3.35, where it says the city manager shall head a department. And then in the new language, it's may.
So, yes, they do. So we would have to make sure that that wording was accurate one way or another. I have looked in a variety of different sources to try and figure out why the, sorry.
On that for you. I've tried to do some research on why they were compelling the city manager to be a director of at least one department. And this is, again, a guess, but it's an educated guess. I think that the idea here is that they want to give the city manager a role as a director in order to ensure that the city manager is treated as an officer of the corporation, which is the municipality. Now, you'd think that as city manager that you are, but you're not necessarily, because it is a creation of the charter in and of itself. So it's sort of giving the city manager 2 hats. And again, I think that there is a bit of a protection for the city manager in a situation like this, because it ensures that she or he is in a position where whatever actions they take are protected. And that goes to issues of things like sovereign immunity, indemnification questions, that sort of thing. So I can see that it bestows upon the city manager certain benefits that would be protections in the event that there was outside action of some sort taken. But that's the only thing I can come up with, and I can't come up with any case anywhere that explains that here's the purpose why we do this. I did reach out to some folks in the municipal league to see if anybody had any thoughts, and I didn't get anything back that was particularly instructive. It was more like what I was saying, trying to give them that hat. So in the event the city got sued, in the event that, again, the city manager got sued, if we try and separate the city manager from the other directors, we couldn't do that because she or he would be wearing a director's hat. And so there would be the protections that come in sovereign immunity in situations like that. But that's the only reason I can see for it. So going back to the question, why do we have shall or why do we have may? I frankly think that under the circumstances, there is some wisdom in bestowing upon the city manager those additional benefits, which would mean that you'd use the word shall as opposed to may.
Okay.
Does that make sense? It's kind of vague.
Yeah, it does a little bit.
So when we see a lawsuit that gets filed against a municipality, they will sue, oftentimes, they will sue the officers of the municipality. And they will sue them both in their official capacity and their individual capacity. Official capacity is very, very important because official capacity essentially says we're suing you as a representative of the organization and your acts are deemed to be those of the organization, which means that she or he does not have any personal liability. It would all be municipal, corporate, as it were.
Yeah.
And when we use the word corporate, not in terms of the business, but in terms of the body, the corpus, okay? So in this situation, there were benefits there that would be a shall as opposed to may, but only because you're protecting the city manager,
Okay.
some insurance.
So in the new language proposed for Article 4, we should change the may to a shall.
And, or refer back to, again, shall be a director as described in Article 3. So you can reference the language or shall be, again, but you still use the word shall. That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Okay.
And again, as much as I hate to say it because it seems weak, but I'm saying do it because I can't think of a good reason not to. But there are those additional benefits that are.
Okay.
Could we make her the director of the directors? Would that, because
She's
that's really
already-
what she's doing.
It's already that.
Yeah.
But the one reason you'd make her the director of personnel is because the duties of personnel are so important. And ultimately, everyone wants to be answerable to her. By making her the director of the Department of Personnel, you're really sort of answering that question because you are making her the director of directors. So that's a great idea. I think that's the way to
Okay.
funnel that.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
And this is not directly related to your question, but on current section 4.2, where we have directors of departments.
Yes, sir.
Now, again, maybe I've misinterpreted what our proposed change for all of Article 4 is, but at this, at least the version that I'm working with does not have this language. There shall be a director who shall be an officer of the city, heads of the department. We're dropping all that language. Is that okay? Are there any legal implications of not having that stipulation in there?
No. And again, part of the reason that I think it's okay is because what you're saying in other places is establishing all of these various departments, which by their nature have to have a director, right? So again, I think that the language that you're proposing gives you that basically takes what we've always had. It still memorializes it being there so that in the event that the statute would change, which says that all these things would apply and we don't really have to have all these details, we still have enough in there, enough framework, enough scalable framework in there that we can build out from that. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah.
If we ever had to. Okay. So again, as it stands right now, we don't have to worry about this. We're only talking about contingencies that may occur.
Neil, may I ask another question in the proposed language for Article 4? And that things, the organization and structure would be in the city code. Does that give any flexibilities for, say, if a department name wants to be changed? Would that be allowable, or does that still have to go to a public vote?
So let me pull up, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact language. Let me look at it that way. Maybe I do. Here it is. I've got this, yeah. This is it, right? Or is this an older copy? So I'm sorry, could you restate your question? Let me, now that I've looked at it, I wanted to make sure I reviewed it again.
Yeah, I was just trying to pull apart in my mind if the administrative plan and organization and structure of these departments or in ordinance and in the city code, does that give flexibility, say, if we want to change the name of a department, can that be done through ordinance, or it doesn't have to go to a public vote again?
So if you wanted to change the name, so looking at the first paragraph, my read on this says, the council shall adopt by ordinance in chapter 3 of the city code, an administrative plan of organization and structure for at least the following departments, Department of Finance, Department of Public Works, Department of Personnel, I don't know why there's a comma, should be a semicolon. Department of Law, boards and commissions to include Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Adjustment, Parks and Recreation. So we've given now the framework. These things, at least these departments exist, okay? I think if you wanted to then eliminate a department, and changing the name would arguably be an elimination, even if you're transferring the duties, probably have to amend the charter to do it. But in looking at these are your core services, right? So I can't conceive of a situation where you necessarily need to change the name. You could change the duties. You always have room to do that, and a rose by any other name would still smell as sweet, right? So it doesn't really matter what we call it. It really matters what duties we assign it in the ordinance.
Okay, because, so we have in the charter Department of Personnel, but doesn't go by that anymore. It goes by Human Resources.
Right. So
Um,
again, we could make that human resources here. The reason I like personnel is because we have personnel policies. And again, I like the consistency, but that's just a personal preference. That's not legal.
Okay,
So, but we could change that to human resources rather than Department of Personnel.
okay.
But that,
Just to,
Would have to be-
reiterate again, I personally don't like the idea of having to go to the voters to eliminate departments or change their name or whatever. It ties the hands too much.
how important is a name change?
It might be, you just don't know.
Well, right, and you write.
I
this
mean,
for
there's
as many-
things that happen that we've never dreamt of that got changed.
And you write these for as many contingencies as possible, but I'm not sure that's a hill I would die on.
But what if they decide in their wisdom to merge with the recreation department with Richmond Heights or something? You'd have to go to the voters. Or what if you want to combine departments? Forget even that, which is more drastic. Let's say within the current context, you want to combine departments. You have to go to the voters. To me, that ties the hands of the council and the city manager too much. It's not how things work in the real world. A company doesn't go, I don't think a company goes to their board of directors to change departments, to merge departments. That's an executive decision.
Yeah, except that you're talking about government, and government is a consensual thing. Government is, we are all consenting to participation in this particular process. And so to me, going to the voters, again, while it has a cost attached and while it can be remarkably burdensome, flip side of it is when the voter speaks, that's the end word.
Well, number one, we're not a direct democracy. Number two, the US government and the state of Missouri don't require going to the voters to do that.
And perhaps they should.
I don't agree.
Well, so in this situation, all we're saying is, these are the repercussions.
These are your
Except-
personal political
except-
philosophies.
And I'm not suggesting that they're not, Paul, but I'm
Okay.
suggesting that your personal philosophy is a little bit different than my own. I'm simply suggesting to you that there needs to be a framework. And I've said all along what my opinions are, and I've indicated all along what my personal biases are. So there's not a point where I've hidden that from you. This is a situation where I think I've been pretty straightforward, have I
Right.
not?
Yeah, no, I respect I have some sense of, from a functional point of view, that it doesn't work very well. And it stirs up a lot of animosity when you do something like that.
And I'm not, again, I'm simply saying here that if your idea is that I don't want to go to the voters, I'm not sure that's a point that ever sells with Neil Bruntrager. Now, you guys are going to make recommendations to the council and they'll make the final decision. But from my perspective, you need to put limits. on what government can do as opposed to unlimited government. But that's my personal opinion.
Neil, would it be appropriate on in the last paragraph to say that departments may be renamed and additional departments, blah, blah, blah?
You're creating a bit of an internal inconsistency because you're saying that at least the following departments must exist. All right. So again, in so doing, by implication, you're indicating that they will exist. Now, again, if you want to call public works, streets and something else, that's not substantive in terms of what they're going to do. Could you do that? Probably. Or, again, or you could have an alternative name, it's the performer formerly known as Prince, right? We could say Public Works, now known as. You could do a variety of things there. I think you could probably put language in there that says, something simple like a name change can be done by ordinance, but the basic functions would have to remain the same. I think you'd have to add more language in there in order to make sure that you could address just a name change. Okay.
Any other comments? No? Okay. We'll move on. I think, Neil, when we get the presentations, may we run those past you
Yes, ma'am.
to look that
Yes,
over?
I'd be glad to review them. Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay.
And I'll give you my personal opinion. I'm going to give you Paul first.
All right. Oh, let me ask you one more question before
Yes, ma'am.
we lose you. In 2.10,
2.10.
that is under the council that deals with creation of new departments or offices and change of duties. And early on in our process, we put a period after the first offices and deleted the rest. It's my thinking that we probably need to undelete that whole section that was deleted.
So, Madam Chair, my thought would be this is redundant with what you already have in 4, that you would still be safe in leaving the period there because you've already created the power to do that in the other section.
Okay.
Again, that's at first blush, but again, I would tell you that you've given yourself, in my opinion, the authority to do all the things that are outlined here in 2.10 in the language in Article 4, because you've said that you'll adopt by ordinance in Chapter 3 of the City Code an administrative plan of organization and structure. That's where you're going to be talking about functions and duties, right? You're in the 3rd paragraph saying additional departments, boards, and commissions may be created by ordinance. So I think you've said all the things you'd want to say in 2.0. I think you can still safely just put the period there and after offices.
Okay. Because to me, it sounds like this would give us permission to get rid of any office, but then you're saying that the 1 and 4 would hold us back from doing so.
So this would tell you that you may assign additional functions or duties to departments or offices established by this charter. The council may not discontinue or assign to any other department or office any function or duty assigned by this charter to a particular department or office. This would limit your ability to do that.
Okay.
Is that what you're saying?
But we deleted all that language after, but we should reinstate it is what I'm trying to figure out.
Nope. And I don't know that I necessarily think you do need to reinstate it.
Okay.
I think that the things that this is saying here, you have created already in the new language for Article 4.
Okay.
Now, again, that's one of the limitations that I was talking about. But Article 4 talks about creation of things. Article 2 talks about basically changing or doing away with things, okay? Article 2 says you can't. I think Article 4 says you can with the proposed language, again, by implication.
Okay. All right, I just didn't make sure we weren't in conflict there.
I don't think it's in conflict.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All right, we'll move on to discussion on community and public engagement as a charter article. The model city charter has that as a recommendation. I believe Mayor Arnold, the city council is interested in public engagement. I don't know if a charter article or an ordinance or.
So at the present time, there, in the charter, there isn't anything that even states that as a value of the council. And certainly as you thought about the preamble and adding some different kinds of values in there, public engagement, and one of those was one of the things that was discussed as perhaps being appropriate for the charter to make sure that future councils see that as part of their responsibility.
Okay. How do everyone feel about, I don't know if you like the language that the model charter puts forth is.
What is the, Madam Chair, what is the language that the model city puts forth? Because I read through that and there's actually several sections and
Yeah,
actually several options that are kind of thrown out there. And frankly, I was a little confused by the whole thing.
yeah, well, you're right. There's several sections and a lot of verbiage, and I don't know if it's something that we would want to copy and use or make our own. I found a couple, two things from it, public engagement from, one is the town of Halton Hills and the other was actually from England, and they put forth a public engagement charter that I'm not sure is in their charter, but it was a message to the public of how we would deal with public engagement and what their promises are. I'll pass those around. But I think if we want to pursue this, we would need to know from everyone if they like this language, do we want to wordsmith it differently?
I like the additions that we had.
In the model
Yeah.
city?
No, well, we took them from the model city and put them in our charter. So that's the model city section right there. For the
Yeah.
preamble.
They have a whole section of language. And that-
Oh, oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
talking about something. I am not on the same subject. Excuse me. I'm back on the last subject.
yeah.
Madam Chair, I guess what I'm wondering is to memorialize this into the charter as a separate article. Is that needed? And if so, and if there is a desire to do that, how far do you go? Is it one or two sentences, or is it some sort of longer discussion beyond the reference we have? And we'll be talking about the preamble and the other issue briefs for the open house, but we're playing around with the idea of having public engagement or community engagement, whichever way you want to rephrase it, as part of the preamble. What more is needed there, and does the structures of government need that sort of guidance? memorialized within the charter.
Anybody have thoughts on it? I mean, we could just put it down as for the council to consider.
I would just say, something that I like about this section is unlike the preamble, which it's not going to make any changes. Like for an example, I like this section, principle of public engagement, because it does make the city commit to section D, making considerations for people who don't have broadband, who have limited proficiency with technology, and challenges related to deaf-blind accessibility. So that is something concrete that would actually make a material change in how the city operates. It would force them to make considerations for those people. Adding something to the preamble, which just is flowery language, isn't going to make any substantive changes.
Adding this section.
Yeah, and there was a suggestion of which of these, I really think, section 701, 702, and 703. I think you could just plug and play those in there, but there would obviously be a cost involved, which the city would have to consider, but
Well, that one thing that you passed around, which had the expectations of the council and of the community, could we ask that the city have one of those? Because that was a really nice listing of responsibilities. Is that getting passed? Let's get passed down that way because people haven't seen it. So we could just, we could specify that, that sort of document should be created or available as part of the public engagement. What are the responsibilities and expectations on both sides?
And Matthew, are you suggesting then whatever article on public engagement is crafted can be kept short and and that it references creation of a policy or a plan or whatever that, this charter is, this sort of separate public engagement charter goes into detail.
Yeah, it's really, a list of expectations for both sides. That's too detailed to be in a charter.
True, but I do agree that some sort of basic structure that that he was referring to be included with the charter, especially to groups that that may have some sort of challenge with getting access to the information.
I too think that it should be clearly spelled out in the body of the charter. Every council may not be as committed to public engagement, as this one is. Thank you.
I'm gonna phone a friend and the attorney's not here. Is like something that this transparency and engagement, is the sunshine or any sort of like commitment to open data or anything in the charter already? I can't control F. Oh, wait, I can. I have a computer right here. I'll do that myself.
So I apologize. I only heard the last piece of that.
So I guess the question, like, does the city have a sunshine ordinance that's an ordinance, or is that in the charter already?
Sunshine's not in the charter. Clearly, we adhere to sunshine as a municipality and state regulation. So the transparency is there due to sunshine. The public engagement is the different piece. In terms of the public engagement, my only hesitation, if I were asked, including some of the accessibility language, is making sure that it's broad enough so that it could be changed if needed. Technology is changing every single day. So how do we make sure that we're matching that? I don't want to be stuck in terms of the city not advancing with what accessibility is doing. So I love the piece on public engagement. And this council is incredibly publicly engaged, but again, we're not making the recommendations and you all aren't doing this for this current council. It's for councils to come. So what does that public engagement look like?
So I'm hearing a kind of a feeling that the majority would like
Mhm.
something in the charter.
There's a lot here that I'm looking at for the first time, and clearly we wouldn't want so much detail, but I do think more than a blurb in the charter and referencing this is not the way to go. I think it really, we need to outline the expectations within the charter. But having said that, this is the first I've seen this, so
Yeah,
how that.
okay.
Is there a document you all would like copies of?
I can email them out. Marie, I just was poking around, seeing what other places did
This is
and,
an actual community, I guess.
I mean, I think that these are nice. Oh, am I not on? Sorry. I don't know. I feel like what's in here needs to be in the charter. Again, not as thorough as this, but I don't feel like we should reference something
Okay.
else. Is, I guess
Um,
where I'm going.
so my thinking is we have an open house on August 9th. Can we craft language by then that we're going to present to the public? Do we want to, since we're running short on time, do we want to work on that and give it as a presentation to council that they could carry forward after we make our recommendations? What do y'all feel?
Madam Chair.
Oh.
Just a couple of suggestions. Perhaps this is a topic that should be assigned to some subcommittee, have at least one or two or three people kind of pull together and develop a draft of an article section. Given our timing, I don't know if that's going to be feasible to get that done, basically within the next 10 days. And maybe we could potentially raise it as a concept, and if the subcommittee can reach some kind of basic principles to display or to share, get some reaction to. But I wouldn't get tangled up into trying to do the wording specifically, but we do need, folks to pull together and get a draft put together, because this will be, a separate, if it's going to be a separate section, there seems to be some interest in having a degree of detail to it that's more than just a sentence.
Mhm.
Joe, it might be a good thing again at the meeting to say this is a principle we're committed to and we're working on it. What ideas do you all have that you'd like to see included?
True. I think folks will probably want to know, okay, what ideas should we be thinking about? Everybody,
Yeah.
so we're going to have to, again,
But you know,
perhaps
that-
use the headings that are listed here in the,
And maybe
Mark,
this would
sorry.
help. It seems to my eyes that whenever there's controversy around town, the first thing that gets said is, well, there was never any public information about this, whether it's, it's not true, but that's what people say. And maybe this could, in a small way, help deal with that too.
agree.
Does anybody want to volunteer for the subcommittee? Paul,
I will.
Melissa, thank you.
I'll do it.
Kyle. All right. Thank you very much. So at the open house, do we want to just put down a couple principles of public engagement that we're considering and see if reaction to it?
Would it be possible to take just some of the excerpts that we're interested in the most from this model city charter and present those as some of the possibilities, but just make a note that it's a work in progress?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, why put the work into it when it's already in front of us? There's 3 different sections here we can just include as an example that we're working from to get feedback.
If you would, subcommittee, send me the bullet points that you want to present. And we'll get it made into, onto the poster boards. Okay. Is there anything else on public engagement? No? Okay. Next, we'll move on to the presentation materials for the town hall. And Joey,
Sure.
go through those.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the other day, over the weekend, we shared the draft of the issue briefs with everyone. Did we want to? I don't know if we necessarily want to go through it item by item. But if folks want to discuss any issues specific to concerns that you have with the draft that as was shared the other night.
What's the pleasure of the board? Do you
I
want
mean,
to
I
go
can
through them?
go through each of the sections, but
Yeah, I do have comment, but I don't want to jump ahead if you want to go through the sections, because I want to jump to compensation,
Okay.
so.
Are
But
you-
again, don't want to do that out of order if you
you're
want to go through
showing-
all of
I
these.
am.
Oh,
What do you want?
Okay, good, okay.
Tell me what you'd like.
Okay.
He's just useless over there, right?
Okay.
He's just the cameraman.
Okay, look, I'll just kind of walk through quickly and, you know, if you have a comment, question, you want to discuss a little further, we'll start at the top and this, the preamble section. Let's go on down. Are there any comments on the findings listed there? Which actually goes into both the city's mission statement process.
This is what-
I also wanted to share some of Jennifer's comments that she had. I think on this one, it seemed so in balance that there's 2 for, 2 against. And is that really the way it is? Because if we're actually for something, are there more reasons pro than con?
I think since we've not taken a vote on anything yet. I don't know that there's anybody that's opposed to the preamble, but from my perspective, the open house is to educate the public on what we're proposing and getting even more feedback. This is the first time the general public is going to see this stuff except for those that filled out the survey. So I don't think we're in a persuasion mode at this point, but gathering feedback and letting them see what we're doing.
I think that's like a really important point to maybe make about this town hall is that we haven't voted yet. That these are all just ideas we're presenting to them, that we want their input
Right.
before we make any, decisions of what to present.
Right, because
think
I mean,
that's-
I'm coming from a point where I feel like we are persuading them. And so where is my comment coming up is coming from, because we said we were going in as again, educating and feedback, but educating on what we're looking at, what our recommendations are going to be, not just what we've researched. So great to know that that's where we're sitting as a group. Because I think a lot of this is showing more than what we've talked, like we're leaning a lot of direction on a lot of these things and we're not
Yes.
showing that here.
But it is within at least, again, speaking to the preamble section, the findings, I'm trying to make that case. You know, and discussing both the opportunity to talk about, statement of intent, a declaration of intent, and then discussing, the city's work on the next page. I guess the question is whether, the arguments for and against are, distracting from what we want to try to communicate.
Yeah, because
Particularly for the open house.
you're trying to make the case and I don't know what case you're making.
I kind of thought it was helpful and might
prompt more thoughtful conversation from the public, right? Like if they're, I mean, maybe we could make it more clear, hey, here's just some thoughts. We're not pressing one way or the other, you know, add on yourselves, but it just so that we can have more substantive conversations rather than, oh, why do some people think this is a good idea and a bad idea? So we don't spend all our time
Mhm.
verbalizing those points. I think it's helpful to have it out there.
And I
people-
also.
The conversation can springboard from there.
Exactly. And at least part of my ulterior motive was just to help prepare us as we staff this to understand, okay, here's a comment we got to be prepared for. I wasn't trying to, make a persuasive case, but to prepare our, our team here to be able to anticipate what kind of questions could come up. If we find that is confusing, maybe, I don't know, do we take that section out?
Or do we retitle it, right? Instead of saying pros and cons, we just sort of list, here are some of the factors that we considered or that are informing our decision.
But they do kind of come into pros and cons.
They do.
But if we just said that it's like, these are the various points of view about this subject, not labeling it pros and cons, it might seem, we don't want to go into this making it look like we already made up our mind.
So you're suggesting making one title of points of view, period? And
Oh, yeah, and eliminating the different sections. That's an interesting thought.
Although will it read a
Operations.
little odd if we have one or two arguments in favor and then we switch to arguments being made against? Does that look a little
You could alternate them.
Right.
alternate?
I mean,
Then it looks like we're, I don't.
well, I don't know. I
Alex-
mean, isn't that more realistic of what a group of people would be? Is just like a constant dialogue and
Right.
some are in favor and some are not.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of like our listening sessions, right?
Yeah, I think it's important because the questions that I got about the survey is, well, what does that mean? And the pros and cons or those points of view really explicate more of what it is we think that section means. And so I think we need some of that information in there.
And some people aren't going to necessarily read it. They'll just add up the bullets. Oh, there's 3, 4, and 2 against. Okay. Yeah, we're human. It's a shortcut.
How are we going to collect feedback?
I figured I'd be standing there with a notebook and a pen.
Yeah.
But what we did at the Business Development Commission, we had like a coffee and at these, we had, these poster board, project boards that had this on there and we gave everyone those lined note, Post-it notes so that they could leave their comment in their own words
Mhm.
Yeah.
and then post it on the board. And then afterwards we collected them and presented them back to the commission.
That's an
Yeah.
excellent.
I thought
Yeah.
that was the intent.
I think we briefly discussed that maybe at an early.
That way they can put it all in their own
Yeah.
words.
Right.
And they can comment on each other's comments. And so that's a much more, I like
Right.
that.
They can see maybe what somebody else thought and it could trigger another,
Yeah. And now that might argue that maybe this slide is helpful because people can declare one way or the other what they're for or have concerns about either way. Again, I'm looking for some direction, whether we take this out or change it or leave it as is. And if there is, someone feels strongly that there needs to be an additional argument missing, or do we just keep it balanced and just move ahead?
I think I'm okay.
I
if
do
we
have a
look-
time, we have a time limit here.
Yeah.
To get this over to Neil so he can make sure we're all in legal clear as we move ahead here.
I think, and because the context of the fact that we haven't voted yet kind of changes how I look at it also, that leaving it the way it's been brought together, because we will get more pros and cons from the public, but as long as it's clear to them, these aren't the final. This is, tell us, and we're going to go back and talk about it more and then vote.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. We'll
Yes, sir.
go through, next section is the wards, discussion. And I think you just go on down. Proposals is, this is, no change to a ward system, change to a hybrid system. And I just, again, we have not taken votes, on this. Tried to encapsulate the findings. And this is pretty much from Kyle, from your report. So the subcommittee report. Comparison of the municipalities.
Scroll back up for 1 second. Sorry.
Go back.
Yes. Further?
Oh, nope, I just read it wrong. Keep going.
Do any of the local municipalities have a hybrid system? Is-
Not that we found.
You know, so I think, as you pointed out, Kansas City, itself does. And that's the only thing, in the region. Go on, next one. Okay, so these arguments kind of pulled together. I know there's one item that we have left out, and whether we want to discuss pros and cons of.
Yeah, my concern is that the cons, where's the cons? Dropped off the potential concern about barriers and about the let's see, that's in favor of, where's the opposed? Is that above? We lose that altogether. That's in favor.
You're too far now.
Yeah,
It doesn't have cons, just says in favor of each.
yeah. So we got rid of all of the cons.
No, I think it just went under in favor of at large
Yeah,
versus.
there was a concern about having 3 sets here, so.
Okay.
So I just talked about in favor of each section, of each topic area.
So, and my concern remains that the wards would decrease the representation the minority representation we have. And I think that, and that's, I'm concerned about that not being in there.
I don't know, you and I have had a quite
Mhm.
lengthy email discussion, and you know, the literature is all over the place on wards and at large and minority representation, and I think a lot of the studies that I've seen don't even consider hybrid models.
Mhm. You haven't seen anything on hybrids.
I have not.
My
Um,
concern with a simple line or statement might be that people don't have the access to the research that you're talking about and can misconstrue what the words might mean in a brief statement.
So I have, let me bring up that email, hang on. You know, one of the things, let's see, where's my language? So that currently we have a higher percent, well, no, I've already done all that. So you're not asking for that. You're wanting language. Let me find that and we can go on to something else. And can we come back to this while I find some
Sure,
language that I had suggested?
While you're looking that up.
Yeah.
Oh, my thought on that is that I think I would feel more comfortable agreeing with that or including that comment in there. If we were larger, if we had a larger minority population, if the minority population were more evenly sprinkled throughout our geographic area, I think those points might be more meaningful. But I feel like for us, the way we are now, that to me, putting something like that in is almost misleading.
So I don't think that we have gotten rid of those housing restrictions that caused people to be moved into North Webster. And I have multiracial neighbors, and I suspect most of us have them. They're not in a place anymore. And we don't really want them in a place. I mean, we really would like them integrated. And that's part of the values of the community. One of the alternative languages that I suggested is that large elections result in more diverse boards than do ward-based elections.
So, but I think it would be important if some kind of language or line were included like this, that it be started with, according to the research of, or to the paper, or to whatever this project was, that that a ward-based system may result.
Yeah. This is based on data from St. Louis, and we've.
Because I think the way it's been presented before, it's been presented as a fact. And
No, this is all, I understand that this is research and 5% of research is wrong at least. So based on the way we do research. So I will admit that, but I think it's an important component because when I think about wards, I think about them being implemented to increase racial diversity in elections.
I think of it in additional ways,
Yeah, that's just,
but yeah.
that's the way and that's the way nationally, when people are talking about, we're talking about the districts that are being drawn by states, that's all related to that. So that's the way my head works with those things.
So the reason that I was curious about wards was more geographic. Because so many people are more centrally located that are members on the council. For example, that Zeta Del neighborhood over off Marshall and Summit. If you don't have a reason to drive that direction, you have no idea what's going on. So some of the parking issues, the traffic issues, the construction issues and things like that were not up top of mind to a lot of people in this part of town because they just, you're not experiencing it. Whereas if somebody if there was a council member that came from that area, they would have to experience it and then would have firsthand knowledge of what was going on for that neighborhood.
Absolutely.
So I was thinking of it more as a geographic kind of thing. I just think we need to be clear if there's something we're suggesting from research that the paperwork is available, or a link, a QR code or something that they can see specifically what it is that someone's referring to, and that it may be because it's probably I'm sure there's some evidence based on real life, but that it may or may not apply to Webster, and they need to be able to fully look into that and decide for themselves.
Yeah, in real life, political science research is very messy. I mean, it's hard stuff to do. So.
The people I talked to about this pretty much followed what Tammy's been saying, that the people who liked it was because they felt they'd be closer to their elected official, better chance of knowing the person, better chance. It seems odd because the community's not that big, but better chance they'd know what was going on in their neighborhood, so on and so forth. The racial stuff is not very clear, particularly with the size population. And I think most people would be surprised by that, by the way, because I thought there was clear, and there is clear evidence in larger minority communities.
We just have a really small.
Yeah, but I think it's
minority
the issue of feeling close to some people don't like if everybody's from the same few blocks that's on the council. It's a little bit of a legitimacy issue, I think, for some people. It seems odd to me personally because I've never found anybody to be inaccessible, elected official here, but that's me.
You never found them to be accessible?
Inaccessible,
Right, it's just more of like the common knowledge of the everyday
right.
things that are happening in different parts of Webster, because we have really unique and distinct areas. And there's some parts that I haven't been to in a while, and I drive by and I think, wow,
By the way,
there's some really big
I'm
changes
sorry, I'm
going on.
sorry.
And I had no idea.
People are really surprised, as I was, that we used to have a ward system. Hardly anybody knows that. And I think that might have an effect because then it's not seen as such a radical idea.
Except we got rid of the ward
I know,
system because
but
they
no-
closed, they wouldn't let blacks into the pool. They just
Right.
closed it. So that was that's our history of ward systems, which is not what one would call positive.
No,
So it's, yeah. And, so I looked, I thought about it because there was a concern initially and folks had identified the South of 44 group in particular, because there aren't that many folks from down there who have run on council. There are some, but not as many. And so I looked at their election results for the last elected councils. And those wards were basically, for the ones that were elected, were the same. So they voted for the same people as the folks in Webster generally voted for. So that suggests to me that they don't have a unique potential perspective, that they were happy with the candidates who were running.
Did they have a choice of candidates from elsewhere?
Yeah, well, they had all 6 candidates to choose from.
and didn't you say, Matthew, that their voter turnout was,
Their voter
Higher
turnout
than
is
most
above
places?
average.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not the highest, but it's above our average. But then I looked at, someone had suggested that I look at, are they voting the same way for the council members? And basically they are. So I don't see that as, they aren't voting in a way that is distinct from the rest of Webster. So yeah.
I just think they don't have a choice.
Mhm.
The best choices are your choices.
Right,
They can't vote for something different.
yeah.
So I don't know that there's that comparing, it's apples and oranges to me.
Well, but it seems to me that unless we have a demonstrated creating a policy for something we don't have a demonstrated problem about is not a good idea. If we have a problem with that, and I don't hear one, I just hear we don't have people running for office from down there. So I don't see a demonstrated problem that this fixes.
I think and this is just all anecdotal, from when I served in the House, I would get calls from people south of 44 having issues with flooding issues, and that's not current. It's been years ago. It's about the council members and who are responsive. If I call, do I get a call back? And to me, in Webster, the key things for our elected officials are to have viable candidates that have resources. And there is a strong network, electoral network here. If you're behind a good candidate, I don't care where they are, they're going to probably win if they have that support. But my concern is we can pull up all these studies and cherry pick the ones that suit our biases or our beliefs. And do we want to get into that with the public and putting the burden on them to look at all this stuff and try to decipher through it? Because it's pretty mind-boggling. So, do we want to put a statement in there about wards and what it should be?
I would say the statement that is being suggested is incredibly strong. And if we're concerned about the weight of these pros and cons for all of these, without definitive evidence of a city of our similar size to make that statement is basically hammering this to fail. So that's my thought.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Well, that would be fine with me, but but I can understand that that is my perspective and not necessarily the groups. So that's,
Should we vote?
Do you want to vote?
Vote on adding this suggested dot.
Sure, we want to?
that'd be fine with me.
Okay. So make a motion. Do we include a statement on wards? Or I'll leave it out. So I guess who wants to put one in? And then out. And Matthew, I know I appreciate your passion on this and your research. You're very welcome to voice your opinion.
Oh, I
at
do.
the-
Yeah. it's-
No, at the open house and when we give a report to council, feel free to put in your 2 cents.
And I might also say, if there's a desire to look at this further, is if there's some third party to bring into this to help, discuss it a little further, it just seems we're kind of getting into a morass of academic argument.
Mhm.
Okay.
One thought I had was on the viewpoints in favor of wards, something that we've talked about, but I don't see represented on here. And rather than adding a whole other bullet, we can add another bullet, or on the third one, we could expand it to say something about that it could increase accountability of the elected people, sort of to the point where we talked about where it can be easy for some members to kind of coast because they don't really respond. They're not too responsive, and other people call the same 3 or 4 people get calls from everybody all over the place because they know, the citizens know those folks will respond. So it's a way to,
We'll
make sure
fix that
people are
with the
being
engagement.
appropriately attentive.
We'll fix that with the engagement, new section on engagement.
Not sure I'm making the same connection you are.
So Nicole, where are you suggesting that be added on the,
Either in the viewpoints in favor
of
of
at large
wards,
or
of
wards?
wards or hybrid.
Wards or hybrid? And on the third item?
Yeah, either we can add a whole new one or we can extend that, allow for greater interaction and enhance accountability.
Enhance accountability. Okay. That fits, that's just an add-on to bullet 3.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. We'll move on. Okay, so here, this section here on compensation, I think we've seen this before. Next page. Next page. On this chart page, I did include these 3 scenarios. At one point, I think in an earlier version, I called them options. Just to show different levels. And the first column is equated, I guess, with the Kirkwood situation right now. The second column is kind of in between, and the third one I think is the version that I have plugged into the proposal. But I did went ahead and included the 3 options because we have not voted. There was some member interest, including Jennifer, in showing just one option, the one that we include into the proposal. I was just hesitant to do that. I thought it would be useful to show some options at this stage. And if we go to the next chart.
Can I ask just,
Okay,
there's a question that was brought up last time, the percentage of the budget, and I think it was at the general fund or all funds involved.
This was the
municipal government.
expense. all things.
Is that accurate? I mean, because that, okay, but I mean, like, is it more accurate to like, I don't know, every fund of municipal government, but like, if that includes funds that you receive from, you know, COVID, that's kind of misrepresenting.
So the all funds budget doesn't include some remaining ERP dollars this year. But I think we generally speak as the city when we say of the budget, the all funds budget. Because
Okay.
so much of the capital investments are being outside of general.
But sorry, just to. If I'm thinking of percentage of the budget, I'm thinking of the money that the city receives from my taxes. Is that still,
Yes.
okay,
Most of the all funds, which is 28 million this year, well, 26 of that. is
Okay.
Tax dollars taken in or intergovernmental taxes.
so even if we changed it, it wouldn't make it
It's a minor. amount.
rounding error. Okay, got it.
If there's a desire to footnote that better or explain that further. I just want, again, it's important to make sure this is accurate to Kyle's point.
I think it might be helpful here to have either a header on those columns, scenario 1 or example 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Are we trying to get feedback from people on these 3 options you're presenting to see which one they favor the most? You know, if it was A, B, C, which one do you want to see? Like, if we're asking them to fill things out or to do whatever, are we trying to get guidance from them, or are we actually recommending C because that's what's in the,
If we go to the next slide.
Madam
Uh,
Chair,
yeah,
just
we-
a reminder, please, our listener online is having difficulty hearing. If you could please speak directly into your microphones.
oh,
Mr.
okay.
Dugan, I think you're a little soft.
Okay,
Good.
this one.
Thank you.
So on this one, at the urging of Jennifer and who's part of our subcommittee on compensation, we went ahead and plugged in some actual numbers to show what the proposal could be. I think in an earlier version, I'd left this blank. But I had some feedback that we ought to put something in there.
Mhm.
Now, option 2, the next slide, would be an alternative. And this could be done strategically, where we would just authorize the council to review compensation.
So if I may, Madam Chair, this
Mhm.
is what we talked about last meeting, and I actually went back and listened to it today. I know I raised concern, Jennifer raised concern. I know Matthew agreed as well as Tammy. I think that it's confusing to put option 2 out here. And I understand better now our purpose, as I misunderstood earlier. However, on this particular item, I don't believe there's anybody on this group, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that isn't encouraging a change. And so for us to present it as if we don't do a change, I don't think is representative of what this group is doing, nor do I think throwing it out there for them to give the feedback is what we want to do, because as a group, we've been charged by the council to make recommendations. And I believe the recommendation from this group is to increase compensation. So again, I go back to last week that I think including this option 2 is not where the group is going, and why would we even put it out there?
It's out there, Melissa. I stuck it in there for the reason that, and it says the council shall review their compensation. They have to do it. And I stuck it in there because I can foresee a brouhaha about the whole issue. And I just trying to test the waters and see what kind of reaction we got at the open house to see what we can get past.
I feel like
And
we're
I'm,
gonna get that feedback regardless. Right? Like here we're opening we're opening up to get that feedback where we're gonna get it no matter what. And again, we're presenting it as, I don't know, this is my passion issue, and I feel like this is not what we're saying. We're like, this group wants to change this.
yeah.
And so
I agree.
again, I think putting this out here is not really showing that.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
I am also in favor of increasing the compensation. I also am concerned the city council come January could decide not to put forward our recommendation. This would be a backup option. And that could be part of our recommendations.
Right,
That
we
our
do that,
priority.
But that's not what we're doing. This is about what we're presenting to the public. Of course, we say that to the council. But this is what we're saying to the public, and that's just, from where I'm sitting, that's just not true. Unless you all disagree, we're not going to change it. When we present it to the council, we give them that opportunity. And if it's, politically damaging to them, let them decide that at that time. That's not for us. They didn't charge us with deciding that. They charged us with making recommendations. And we're here telling the public that we could make this recommendation not to change it, but not one of us in here agrees with that. So just my 2 cents. I disagree and would move to remove option 2.
Yeah,
It could be repositioned as if the council chooses not to move forward with the recommended approach. This would be a backup.
Where was the idea of having like an independent commission set up to review increases to sort of take all, some of the burden off the council?
yeah,
We
those
discussed
are,
that
those
with
are
both
in
of these
there.
options.
All right.
Yeah.
So that, and that
Um,
was the big concern, and it's covered in option 1 as well.
And my other point, and maybe this is a small thing, but if somehow we could say, A, the city has the money to fund this, and B, what percentage of the budget it would be, which it's going to be infinitesimal, that might help.
Well, and that goes back to Mayor Arnold's comment on the last meeting that we passed a balanced budget, and that's part of our job to educate the public on that. And, maybe the council talks more about that as well. And the Friday page talks about that more as well. So it's not top of mind to the public that, we have this budget crisis that in reality we don't have anymore.
Because when we were at that North Webster meeting, there was feedback, including from some former council members. Well, this is all well and good, but we don't have the money, or where's the money going to come from? And I think a statement ought to be made. Either we've got the money, or we would not do it if we didn't have the money, or what percentage of the budget it's going to be, which I imagine would be quite small, the increased portion of it. That might help.
Again, on the prior slides, we do show the percentage of the budget.
Okay.
Okay, so that's there as information.
Do you
and-
show that as percentage of the full budget, but not the change percentage, the percentage and change from now to the new amount?
This is,
So it shows
Well,
that,
it shows
if you
the
look at
current.
it, it shows what the percentage would be for each of those scenarios.
so I think we have Paul's comment here addressed with this slide.
So, but with all of the things that we're recommending to council, they can decide if now is the time to put it forward. But I think it's a valid statement to make that we need to show what our recommendations are, not what a backup thing that is the easy do nothing button that people, can think of on their own when they go to the, if it's presented to them, they can consider that as a
I don't mind taking it out, but I don't think it's a do nothing. It compels the mandates that the council review their compensation.
And I would
But
also.
it's just, it's pushing it down the road. It's
No, no.
well, no, but that the council has to come up with some magic number, and that's going to be hard always. That they have to come up with the ordinance to do it, and then.
But right now, they don't have authority to do any of that.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so
right.
it's not kicking down the can down the road, because we have to have the backup strategy if we're going to give them authority to do anything. So it's actually, it's going to be a companion to whatever we decide on compensation, or at least it should be. Because we should plan for the contingency that if the council decides not to go forward, they still have the option to go forward, at least with what that option 2 suggests. Now, at the appropriate time, when we get around to talking about these topics, this particular topic, I'm going to suggest the idea of delay in implementation of the increase to April, after the April 2026 election, in order to then put everybody on the same implementation timeframe, because otherwise you would have or three council members, voting for their own pay increase, or at least that sort of a political argument could be made. And if we delay it further out, which I granted, that's putting it way out, but if we did delay that, at least it gives some political cover for the officials.
I think that your points are completely valid. I just think that including this here and what we're presenting to the public is not the way to go. And I think that's the conversation we're having here. All of that you're talking about isn't relevant to our August 9th meeting, our open house. And I think that, again, what we're presenting the public should be a true representation of what we're talking about. And again, you're going to make a recommendation that we make a change and push it out to 2026, but you're still going to make a recommendation that we make a change. And yes, we can say to the council, if you don't like this, great, do option 2. But I just don't think that we should put that out there to the public because it's not the route we're going.
So are you suggesting maybe that for this, like for all the other ones, we're saying, oh, we haven't voted, we're not really sure, want to hear what you think. On this one, we haven't voted, but we all know, we all want to change. So on this
Absolutely.
one, do we say, look, we are making a recommendation?
Absolutely.
Like, I'm just saying, do we want to format this a little differently than the other
That's
sections?
what I truly believe that's what we should do. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
And make it clear in here, like we are making a recommendation.
Yeah,
We're not
and
interested in opposing
if you-
viewpoints. We're just trying to figure out which
Right.
Yeah.
Which is where it goes back to this slide, right? These are the things we've discussed.
yeah.
And again,
So maybe we
I'm
don't
not
frame it up as
sure.
option 1 and option 2 in opposition to each other.
if you go, I don't know if it's up or down, but you said you filled in amounts at the urging of Jennifer that were blank before.
down?
You could reword those to take into account some of the concerns from option 2, but again, not putting it out there as, well, the other option is we don't do anything except set up this council, right? Because again, we're setting up the council within option 1. So we could look at rewording some of those. I like presenting the options, the different examples, different scenarios as you presented. And so I'm not married to those 2 points there, but again, letting them know that that is the route we're going. What's your feedback on these levels of compensation? Here's the background on, where and why, and here's the, the information on inflation and all the other, getting that feedback there. Again, if they think we shouldn't, they're going to give us that feedback anyway.
Well, and not just levels, but who decides, right? Like, are we going to reset the baseline in the charter? Are we going to leave it all to council? Are we going to leave it to a public commission? I mean, to me, that's kind of what we're getting at here is we're recommending a change. It's just who's going to be responsible for deciding what that looks like. Who has that authority? Do we want that in the charter or is it something we want to delegate to council members like other stuff is?
Well, I think if this would pass, that they can change their compensation by ordinance from there on out.
But I do think we're giving them a boost if we set the level,
I don't-
we reset it now
Yeah, I'm-
so that they have a
That's
new
not
baseline.
necessarily the intent either.
I mean, we could just take out the numbers here
That's.
and leave it
yeah.
and go back to original. Again, I was trying to deal with Jennifer had raised the view that we should put a number in there. But we haven't taken a vote. So
Well, and
I'm-
again, that's, yeah, we haven't voted, but I feel like we all agree that something has to happen.
Yeah.
So how would they know which way we are putting pros and cons, and how would people know what we're leaning towards if we don't put these numbers in somewhere? That we're leaning towards option C,
Mhm.
not A and B, which are the lower levels.
Yeah.
And Kyle, it's funny and it's really simple, but I had a good idea, which is just put some marbles out, maybe little jars that say ABC, let people vote, let them tell us, in a simple illustrative way, and they can also gauge easily what their peers think. They're- But how do they know what direction we're leaning if we don't put something in that section, the words?
I guess I look at the chart with the three different baseline, if we roll that up a little bit. Not so much as options that I really care whether people think, oh, it should be 0.12% of the budget or 0.06% of the
yeah.
budget. Just showing them that, what these dollar amounts look like, and that in the grand scheme of things, to make it a decent amount of compensation doesn't have a huge impact on anything.
Yep.
I just have, I'm not trying to be a Sandman repairs person, but I know this is a very small amount of money, relatively speaking, but where does that money come from? And are we, like, the natural question someone's gonna ask is, what are we losing?
What are we not spending it on? Yeah. Mowing under the highway overpass.
But like, someone's gonna say, are we gonna have one less lifeguard? Are we gonna have one less, maintenance worker or, whatever full-time jobs there are? Is that true or no? Okay. Even though,
We could pay the firefighters more money. Just to be out of attempt at humor.
So thank you for the question. I think that is a fair question. I was thinking perhaps we should put what those dollar amounts equate to. I don't know that anybody's really going to look at that and say, oh, it's, 10th of the 100th of the budget, that sort of thing. So I think we should put the dollar amounts, but we won't be losing. And so I think that's a really important message to share. If anything, from a personal opinion, I think we'll be gaining because it's not cheap to run for council. It's a lot of hours as demonstrated by the memo, all of the things that you all already know. So I'd be happy to try to, from the staff level, come up with some language perhaps that you all could consider for talking points.
Yeah, and maybe, we could title those just example 1, 2, and 3 or something.
Yeah.
and should we maybe be, like, maybe we should make our in favor viewpoint a little stronger and say this will not, we will not lose employees, we will not lose an open position, rather than just saying it's a small number, but it's still a number.
Yeah.
But I would just, that's getting beyond our scope here on this board, because that's really choices that the city council has to make.
That's fair, but I think we're gonna be naive to not expect that.
Well, I know, but again, I mean, those are the decisions that the city council needs to make. We can only put forward the mechanism to get them to make a decision of that nature.
That's fair, but we do want the public to support us, and if our response when someone asks that question is that's up to the council, that it's. What did you say, can down the road?
Kicking the can down.
Yeah.
Okay. All I'm suggesting, I don't even know that we need to change this. I would like to change it, but if nothing else, at least get some talking points of why.
And we can make it separate, like if it was underneath that chart or something that, the city has reviewed this, this is, what their thoughts are on expenditure of this size, that it would, so that it's not coming from us, that it's coming from the authorities that understand what comes in and goes out.
Okay. With that approach, neither for or against it, but that would also almost argue to have a hearing where we have some testimony given in that and talk this through for the record.
Is that something that the council would do on their end once we've given these as recommendations?
Probably, or we ask for,
Because people may just want
feedback here.
clarification then if we make that recommendation, because my understanding is that once we give this to the council, they're going to hold additional public listening sessions and town hall sessions. And at which point they can dive a little bit more into how this money would come about.
And this is going back, but as a member of the public, when I'm presented like with these dollar amounts like this, it doesn't have a whole lot of meaning to me. I think it's hard for the public to put dollar amounts on stuff like this. I would rather say something like the salary range would be in the midpoint of comparable communities and show what, as you have, show what those numbers look like. You know, how do you say, well, it should be this amount of money as opposed to that, you know, then we ought to present zero increase as well, which a lot of people seem to want. That's just a thought.
Yeah, that does kind of pull the focus away from what amount is better, you know, and or what people think about that. And put it more on, hey, we're trying to modernize and kind of be like other communities of our size.
And I think that's probably a fair statement. We wouldn't go for the top salaries and we don't want to have the bottom salaries. It should be kind of in the middle.
Mhm.
I have a question about the budget. The council, I'm sure, has a line in the budget for their expenses and their needs. So could you squeeze another $36,300 into that?
Within the council's budget?
Yeah.
I don't believe the council's budget is currently that much.
Right.
But maybe,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Eric would be able to speak to the budget better, but I don't want to make light of the amount because every single dollar counts. But it is a small amount compared to the rest of the budget. And so all of the amounts proposed are incredibly doable.
So what if we did something like, kind of like, Paul, I think it was you who suggested, you know, that we're thinking about moving it towards something that's more in line with other communities of our size are doing, but then also put in some verbiage, as Marie is saying, like, you know, this is affordable, like, we're not gonna lose a fire truck because of this,
Mhm.
or, you know, this can be worked into the budget without loss of other services or personnel.
I like that statement there. And I really feel like that could be just a footnote here.
Yeah, so like identify the current pay and just to make it perfectly clear how pitiful it is. And then say we want to move it to the community.
And I said it
Median.
before, I've yet to meet a person who would say they should get paid according to a 1965 salary scale. Have you ever met such a person?
Yeah.
So you guys just couldn't do anything else? Okay.
Okay, so to recap, are we removing this chart? And just saying, that we're listing the current pay and moving towards, more standardized local communities?
Or maybe we say, or maybe if we put a number in there, because people are gonna ask, like, okay, what would that be? And I think it's the column 3, maybe we just say, this is what the median, you know, this is what it could work out to. And it's, you know, $36,000, our budget is 20 million. People can do,
Mhm.
you know, just kind of, we don't have to do the math for them. They can see, oh, that's really not a lot.
Sorry, Eric, did you say it does or does not include the cost of the election?
The current council budget includes the cost of elections and also the cost of intergovernmental memberships. So municipal league, things like that.
The actual budget of the council is like 40,000.
The salary budget's about $4,000. Just a little bit over the total amount there.
Well, the chart with the options lets people know the various ranges, saying that, you know, this is not a problem. We won't lose staff or positions or cut the grass one day fewer each week or something. You know, if we can include that here, then they have information.
Do I remember seeing a chart of other municipalities?
That's the prior chart to this.
Yeah,
one.
the prior
Yeah.
chart, I thought we had that already in there.
Yeah,
So if
yes.
we just take those 2 option columns out, put in the one that we said and just some sort of.
Say this represents
Language.
the average, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's not an average and this
Well,
table here is
Not an
just
average, you're right.
is
To
a
bring it in along.
very selected group
That's true.
of comparables.
And we don't have on there marked when those were last updated. You know,
Right.
Yeah, average isn't the right word, but it's kind of.
I mean, in my survey, previously, most cities, rarely do this, update their, council salaries very often. So,
So Joe, are you clear on where we're going? with
no, I'm
this?
not. Yeah. I mean, I can make some arbitrary decisions, but I did that the first time around and see that led to a 30-minute discussion. So I would like to have a little more direction as to what
Yeah.
the board would like to have done here in terms of the information to present.
Do we need a motion?
I mean,
or
because
do we
I
just kinda
think I think
decide?
we've kind of talked around both angles here. I mean, I've heard conflicting information.
So we're okay with this chart, correct? Okay, so let's go to the next page. Any changes to this? Do we want to keep that in there? Put example 1, 2, 3? Do we want to take parts of this out?
I think taking the two middle columns out and just illustrating what a tiny fraction of a percent this increase would be illustrates the scale of what we're talking about.
Is that along the thinking of everybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to take those two out.
Okay.
Okay.
so
I'm
remove
okay
those
with that.
two.
I don't want everybody to throw all their marbles in box one when we're doing box three anyway.
They would ask for, we might get a question for a box 0.
Yeah.
Okay. And then do we want to put, when we get some talking points, do we want to put those as footnotes to that chart? Like, no employee
That seems
position
to
will
be
be
a good
lost. or-
place to put it to
Uh-huh.
me so that it's naturally linked to the data that we're sharing.
Okay,
Right, it's where it's relevant, I believe.
Okay.
Because that is
Because
the
it'll be
first
what they're
question,
thinking about.
and
okay,
that's reasonable.
Yeah.
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so
so move on.
remove to middle and footnotes. Next. And then I'm fine with removing this if it's.
Then we'll remove option 2. This will be just
Okay.
the proposal. Okay.
Would be my preference, yes.
Okay.
I did have a comment about one of the viewpoints in opposition. It was a comment that was made at one of the listening sessions that we had about school board. I'm not sure that we're comparing apples and apples in keeping that comment in there. The school board, do they put in the same number of meetings and hours and review of items like the council does?
So I'll turn on the mic now, but so I honestly don't know the answer. I know we have more actual meetings than they do. They typically meet once a month. We meet twice a month. They do have subcommittee responsibilities, or I'm sorry, district-wide committee responsibilities and school committees. But I honestly don't know the answer to that. And actually, is Mr. Smith still on the line? It might be very helpful. Oh, shoot. You know what? That is a question for him, right? He's our one council member who has also served on the school board. So I'm not going to pull him out of the other meeting, but we certainly can ask him that.
Also right there, that shows that he's doing both. So a council member is, yeah. But I think it's apples and oranges.
I agree.
I
I mean,
agree
Yeah.
we're talking
too,
about
yeah.
government.
Because we can't do,
versus-
council can't do anything about school board. comment.
Right.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Well,
I
what
think
is a
it's-
comment about the school board?
Oh,
People,
it's right there. It's the last. one,
The
that they don't
bottom
get any
one.
comp.
they don't receive any compensation. I'm surprised at
They need
that.
It would be 10 fewer Bunsen burners, Paul.
Now
They
they,
also spend a lot more money too.
now school boards are under state law too. So I mean, it's a different set of issues. I am comfortable taking bullet 4 out.
Yeah, I would
I
take
think
that
we
out.
should.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about on the viewpoints in favor of increasing comp, the first, I can't remember, the first or second one, that it doesn't begin to cover the costs, like just maybe identifying childcare costs for people to serve? Like, is it getting too specific to say, like, what do we mean by the cost associated? Because I don't know that people really think there's a cost, like, oh, you show up and go to a meeting, whatever. But to say, you know, for a lot of people,
I did
they're giving
receive,
up
I
work hours,
received,
they're
yeah.
having to pay someone to care for their children or other people they're responsible for.
Perhaps that would be something like low compensation can prevent qualified people from serving that may need to pay for to have additional expenses such as childcare or, dependent care.
Dependent care.
I could
Services.
reword that like it can create a barrier instead of preventing.
Yeah.
Low compensation can create a barrier.
Oh, yes, maybe like on the fourth bullet, just saying.
Yeah.
Qualified people who may need additional funds to provide blah, 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 like that.
I do think it's important to actually call out childcare though.
I do too.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so just figuring out where to put it.
Okay.
Go on.
Now, these are kind of getting into several of the technical changes. We'll just move through these quickly unless somebody wants to discuss. So this is about the sharing of information. This is Article 4 is probably the more complicated section. And we had that earlier discussion. This was based at least on the information that we had as of late last week. Again, this is talking about renaming of certain departments. And you can move on down. And the chair and I thought it was useful, particularly in this section, to kind of show the side by side of what would change. Now, what I show here is a little bit different than the kind of the working draft that Matthews had up there, because there's some little version control issues back and forth. But again, this is, I don't say Department of Financial Management, Department of Law, Department of Public Works. I sort of just condensed that. Again, I just don't get hung up on legal language will come later, but everything is listed in there. Okay, you can just keep on moving through.
Okay.
And this is changing Department of Personnel to, is it Office of Human Resources, or do we need to call it Department of Human Resources?
I think, Dr. Peoples, you wanted it to be department. You're welcome.
My initial thought was that having a department, whatever languages, which I think is important because currently head office is doing things exterior and not on full level, which it makes it changing, trying to do things in motion. So I do see it have to be department personnel. There is no quality amongst the offices. Same to be said about finance. Have an office of finance.
Okay, we'll make updates to this section to reflect that. Same would apply here. But before we go, Dr. Peoples, here we're Human Resources Director, would it be? Is that the, am I following the logic here? Okay, thank you. This was the language that I think through a prior meeting we had proposed.
From the model
Okay.
city charter.
This Article 10 would be deleted, which actually technically reorders the numbers of the subsequent articles, but we won't get hung up on that at this stage. We'll let the city attorney figure that part out. And again, the same here. This is obsolete, it would be removed. Believe we had discussed the idea of planning and zoning becoming planning and development. Is that?
It's on the website is planning and development, isn't it?
Version of ballot. This is another one of the more technical sections, basically where we're changing that whole section 13.4 to be consistent with what's in practice with the County Board of Election Commissioners and Missouri statute. And this is petition signatures. Whole votes cast, ballots cast saga. I have included here on this bullet point since 1994, the city clerk did research and there are 6 instances of initiative or petitions being filed with the city clerk. Only 3 of them actually went to a vote and describing that circumstances. This is a screenshot of the election returns April 2022 to help show the differences between ballots cast, votes cast, and registered voters to help make the point of how the numbers are much different. In this chart, which we've shared before, is some scenarios of different percentage options. If we were to put forward a motion to shift to registered voters, what the equivalent to current levels would need to be, or if there's increases done. And here for discussion is 3 options. One is to keep the petition level at nearly, it is to shift it to registered voters, but keep the percentage threshold to equal what the current number would more or less be. Second option raises a slight percentage, but that does increase the numbers required. And then the third option would be to simply change the charter to be more clear and reference ballots cast rather than votes cast to reflect current practice. Any further discussion on that section? And this is a technical cleanup thing to align the ballot process for initiatives and petitions, yes, no response. Rather than for and against, I guess is what has been done in the past. And that's it. I'm thinking that maybe these technical sections will probably put into a separate kind of grouping, separate grouping. And whether we divide them up by topical area or something, we'll have to kind of figure out how to group it so it makes sense to members of the public as they walk through.
So how many total sections are there?
By my last count, probably 7.
Okay.
If we group,
We'll be adding public engagement.
and then we got public engagement, so maybe 8, maybe 8. At least my plan, Madam Chair, is to clean up the language as quickly as we can here, share this back with the city attorney, have it draft, have him look through it. And we'll talk with the city and Jenny Starkey and determine next steps in, sending this to a outsourced printer to have set up for boards. I don't have a the timeline. I'm sure it's probably be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, she told me that she needed 2 days. I'm gonna give her a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Next, and we don't have to do this now, but I just, if you have time to go through the charter items, so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. If you see something that's out of whack or you're not clear on, let me know. One thing I thought we could probably omit is 2.3, remove the 12-month council candidate residency requirement. I think that was a big dud with the survey. If we want to move that to the omit column. Okay.
I agree.
All right. I think everything else, Article 4 was the big thing that I had questions about that we talked about earlier. And then I guess for the timeline for our charter review report, of course, August 9th will be our open house and we'll have a lot of feedback, hopefully, from the public for that. And then Neil said that he could be prepared for us to vote for all these items on August 25th. Well,
Sorry, what date?
pardon me,
August.
25th. Oh, wait, whatever, on August 22nd, I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep saying that. And then once we have that done, then we can write our report. So then we'll just keep on the agenda items coming up, voting on our amendments and preparing member remarks. If anybody wants to enter remarks into our report, it's certainly optional, not mandatory. And then our future meeting dates are August 9th, our town hall, August 16th, August 22nd, September 11th, September 26th. And certainly we're free to, we could cancel if these aren't needed, but we just wanted to prepare ahead. Do you think at this time we need to set further dates? I think we're pretty far out.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
as you're thinking about dates, I would like to extend an invitation. I think it's probably about time, especially right after the town hall or after the town hall, to have somebody come and discuss sort of the final push with the council. In other words, after you get things from the town hall, maybe our September 5th meeting to come and just say, here's where we are, here's when we intend to turn things over to you. It might spur my colleagues and I to get our own public engagement events on the calendar for October and November, or
Okay.
November probably is better to give you all plenty of time.
Okay,
But it would just be, I think, helpful for making sure the process runs smoothly in the handover of your report if we can have a little update.
okay. Would that be in your work meeting or council meeting?
As we've discussed, it would be during the regular meeting, in
Okay.
part because we'd like more people to see it and
Okay.
more people tend to watch, but also I think we've already booked the work session.
Okay.
Madam Chair, do we have a plan for, or do we know how many of the board will be attending the town hall and who will be working the different stations, or is that still to be determined?
Based on the doodle poll that was turned in there several weeks ago, what I had listed was Matthew, Kyle, Jennifer, Tammy, and Paul listed as being available to attend.
I'm not available that day, as it turns out.
Okay.
So.
I'm gonna, oh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna try. It's not a great day for me. I have a deadline the following day, but if I can, I will, but it will definitely be last minute.
Okay. To answer your question, Tammy, I don't know. What's the best thing is just to have us floating around and in between the presentations and asking people if they have questions.
I've only
Uh-huh.
been to one thing similar, which was the business coffee, and a distinct person was at each section, because then they're well versed in that topic. But we can do it whichever way people want. I just didn't know if there was a plan.
No.
Not set a plan yet, but I have been given a little thought to the idea, and I think I raised it to the last meeting. We could look at either taking assignments and staying put within a station or rotate around. Part of this is contingent upon how many people are showing up and where people glom onto. If they, if people are more focused on one or two topics, we may need to adjust staffing against that. So I
It
think
sounds
we'll
like
need to
we-
be flexible.
Sounds like we don't have enough people to have one at each anyway.
No.
Madam Chair, if I may, to the business coffee that Tammy was mentioning, we found it very successful. If you have a couple people doing the check-in, we can help you provide sign-in sheets. But also in that, since it's a different model and not just going to the microphone, explaining right there. You can go to stations, leave your comments on Post-it notes, and that really gave people a sense of understanding. And then you can have floaters, I think that really can work stations and such.
We should have some sort of badges that we wear,
Mhm.
names and
Yeah.
that we're crabby and we'd be happy to talk.
So we can get posted notes, right?
We have all that.
Yeah, you have that.
The anticipated supplies, badges, that sort of
Yep.
thing. Staff can also assist with the check-in table. Happy to do that. We, of course, wouldn't be at any of the stations answering questions. That needs to be charter review members, but any of those logistical things, we can help that evening.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
all right. No more meeting dates. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Nicole, there a second?
Second.
Tammy, all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned, 6:55.